Hello, fellow targeted individual. I want to talk about institutional nudging and UI nudging. Institutional nudging embeds choice architecture into policies, workflows, and culture to steer behavior at scale. UI nudging applies these tactics within digital interfaces, using defaults, highlights, and prompts to shape individual decisions. Both can result in structural coercion, manufacturing harm by design rather than preventing an incident. And in the past, I have noted DEI integration into the Fusion Center, National Guard. Thankfully, defunding for that has come to a cease. So DEI optics led to conservatives and many journalists and free thinkers being labeled as threats. So this would trigger surveillance and signals, which would lead to nudging and escalation of your targeting. Outsourced DEI training amplified these risks, enabling false flag narratives through engineered misinterpretation, which was created by design. See, these false flag dynamics were based on outsourcing to our veterans, to Freemasons at times, members of civic groups, and there are many cases where they have utilized contractors to go knock on doors, to go to a block watch captain and say, hey, if you see this guy, do this, do that. So that way they could trigger a response, while at the same time they're doing this stuff to you at restaurants, schools, while you're in line with your family when you go for a bike ride. DEI was utilized as a suppression tool. It was originally designed to promote fairness. DEI frameworks have been co-opted into tools of surveillance and suppression for targeting conservative voices, faith-based groups, and even veterans, which, by the way, they're utilized as a targeting resource. DEI optics often provided a cover for CIA-linked operations, which were embedded into our schools through covert agents, some with ties to Antifa, BLM, and other groups. And they were being utilized to conduct targeting operations in schools, restaurants, and in communities through NGOs and civic spaces. Some activists and operatives sacrifice their lives for DEI. They make attempts to do it, believing it to be a moral frontier. Yet in practice, it often protects institutional legitimacy or mask covert influence, simulating virtue while reinforcing control. Now, it's no secret, fellow TIs, that there are targets which have been harassed by members of the U.S. Army, by select groups which keep the rest of their troops on that base in the dark. And this doesn't occur in every community where the Army is at. And I have video documentation which shows in Texas, the National Guard being utilized. Back in 2019, they had a massive fleet of cars. They were doing surveillance, and there were cases where they were harassing people and nudging them in highly populated places. Not doing it in a parking lot, but in a store, jam-packed. And not once or twice or like 40, 50 times, way more than that. So before 2025, the Department of Defense linked DEI to mission readiness, embedding it into its recruitment and public optics during domestic deployments. So Entities like BlackRock and defense contractors, they profit from instability, using nudging to escalate threats and justify budgets. Then we have like Israeli-linked firms, which blur the line between security and influence, creating narrative smokescreens. Veterans and civic liaisons may be deployed to discredit whistleblowers, while public messaging steers compliance, masking deeper control of their objectives. For instance, BlackRock's ESG frameworks, which push DEI compliance across sectors, especially in finance, education, and municipal governance. While not directly tied to fusion centers, their optics pressured and influenced hiring, training, and outreach standards that fusion centers adopted to remain aligned. This created a feedback loop. DEI optics became a reputational shield, and fusion centers became nodes for enforcement. This drift demands a principled, nonviolent response rooted in documentation, constitutional clarity, and legacy-driven resistance. Exposing these dynamics is not defiance, it's a testimony against structural corruption enabled by neglect and covert strategy.
One of the strategies which was being utilized for false flags were civilian fronts and institutional partners. So CIA assets were commonly embedded into NGOs, academic institutions. Some were operating as private contractors that appear neutral but serve strategic intelligence goals. These fronts allowed influence to be exerted subtly through education, media, or community programming without revealing CIA involvement. Trust was utilized as a strategic asset. Veterans were utilized. And the reason why you've been harassed by veterans, active duty military, in libraries, in classrooms, where you walk, where you bike, where you fish, where you worship, it's not about countering terrorism or public safety and national security. They're nudging you because they're being given a contract. They see that you've been harassed for years, but they don't stop. And the reason why is because of money. See, veterans are also widely trusted by the public. 8 out of 10 Americans express high confidence in them. This trust makes veterans ideal conduits for influence, especially in politically charged or crisis-prone environments. Then we have employment and outreach contracts. Veterans are often hired into roles that appear to be civic or educational, but are designed to subtly guide community behavior. These contracts may involve public speaking, mentoring, and participation in local boards, where their credibility nudges public sentiment towards strategic goals. So for this reason, many targeted individuals relocate to different cities, and they find themselves being harassed in the same exact manner all over again. Never ever believe that if you're going for a bike ride and you're noticing things you've never seen before, that it's normal. If those activities defy the probability of an event where it's mathematically impossible to occur, then targeting is occurring. Let me give you an example. Let's say you relocate from Austin, Texas, and you drive to Mount Dora, Florida, and you start biking with your family or your aunt, whoever, and then all of a sudden people are walking out of their homes. They're walking up to the sidewalk, they whistle one time, they go back in their homes. Oh, that's not a coincidence. That's not something that's normal. That's by design. So you may notice they may come into neighborhoods with a fleet of vehicles with different department logos in a circle. They may go down an aisle of a store and whistle one time really loud. Then the next aisle you go, they pass by you and just whistle one time, the exact moment they pass by you. They may do some type of skit, which is clearly seen. So sometimes our enemies are seen but not heard, and sometimes they are heard but not seen. They try to do things in a very sneaky manner to try to trigger a reaction. And they like to do this in places that are typically in the public and where there's lots of cameras. You know why? Because they're going to make that footage classified. They want to paint this picture that you're a threat and you're a problem. So it's for that reason they can't stop until there's a serious incident where one of these people go out and they start looking for those that are behind this. Don't go that route, fellow TIs. I have found some of these people utilizing government vendors that lease out cars for this clandestine activity. Say no to violence. Say no to terrorism. I know it's really hard to stay focused on your goals when you've been traumatized. Many targets have faced divorce. Many targets are living with their families. They're incapacitated due to trauma. They can function like normal human beings, but they're traumatized. They have PTSD. They just want to stay home and be left alone. They're nonviolent. They don't hurt or harass anybody. And you need to be able to heal. But how do you heal in a toxic environment where these people continually take shots at you? Let me give you an example. Just 3 days ago, I'm biking. And once I get towards the very end of the bike trail, I have a few incidents. I just ignore them and keep biking. I've been doing this for 6 years here in Florida. In Texas, it was 5 years. In New Mexico, it was a year. In Northwest Florida, it was pretty much half of my life. And I dealt with InfraGard. I dealt with the CIA. I dealt with military partners. I dealt with sheriff's associations, citizens on patrol, citizens core programs. They utilized nudging tactics where they would make their presence known just to promote violence, not prevent it. They weren't there to stop crime or terrorism. And the enemy would flag me to first responders. I could just be in line paying for gas, and they would bump into me, ram their shoulder into me. Or they would get inches away from me while paying for something. This was to violate my space, to intimidate me. And that is what the enemy seeks to do by slandering you as a threat. So for this reason, I encourage targets to save money up, learn a different language, and look at other countries which do not have a U.S. embassy, even if it's Venezuela, even if it's Cuba, even if you have to get on a plane and fly from Nicaragua to Cuba to declare political asylum, even if you have to go to China and declare political asylum and relocate to an extremely rural area. Do what you have to do to survive. I understand that some of us, we just can't pick up and leave. We have obligations. We have elderly parents. We have people that depend on us. But what good are you if you lose your mind? I haven't lost my mind, but there are some people that are weak-minded. And they snap after 2 weeks of being harassed on a daily basis, 40, 50 times a day, threatening phone calls. My life was like a Gene Seberg type movie, harassment nonstop, and I'll never commit suicide. But one thing is for sure, the enemy is not going to stop targeting me. Just yesterday, I had my phone sitting down, and I'm watching a movie, and I see my phone is typing up the word assassinations. And I look, I'm like, holy crap, how's this possible? And I utilize some tools, and somehow a remote user has been able to type stuff and alter stuff, even in my emails, removing stuff from my Google Drive. If you're a targeted individual experiencing targeting by elderly people and people which are middle-aged, wearing suits, dressed as office professionals, And you're being harassed in libraries, at community colleges, and in classrooms. Typically, that always goes back to your CIA or some type of DoD partner or contractor involved in black ops. You're going to notice a lot of like radical feminists, LGBT, transgender. I've gone through this more than half of my life, and I have letters from students, teachers that can't figure out why this is occurring, but it's always based on the utilization of ex-military, primarily dropouts from the Army. So this is very real. Just wanted to put that out there. Anyway, stay strong. God bless. Peace.